Okay, it's time to talk about COVID. Where are we at? Critical COVID theory. I coined it TM. We're going to jump in to a sweet episode of Cooper Stuff. What's up, everybody? How's it going? Welcome back to Cooper Stuff. All right, I am on the road clearly, and I'm in this sweet room that they're letting me record in. It's beautiful with the gold in the background. If you can't see me, it's beautiful. Sorry it doesn't sound as good or look as good as normal, but I'm on the road, crushing. We're having a great tour. We got to jump into this. A friend of mine hit me and he said, dude, are you going to cover all the stuff that's coming out about COVID? And I was like, well, I kind of wanted to, but I didn't know if people were sick to death of me talking about COVID. I covered it so much. I don't know if they're like, oh my gosh, let it go. I remember somebody said to me once last year after the mask thing and after the mask mandates were lifted or whatever, and I was traveling, I made like a little, kind of a funny little video, and somebody's like, dude, you got to let this COVID stuff go. And I was like, oh, maybe people are annoyed with me. My friend told me that people are not annoyed with it. So here we are. So I had to do what I did, which was come up with the cleverest title ever. Critical COVID theory. That means we have a lot to explain today. So here's where we're at so you understand what we're doing. Number one, I'm going to tell you why I talked about COVID so much. There's two reasons. I want to give you the down low, they call that the DL, on things that you may already know, but it's stuff that's coming out about all the COVID stuff. Now, by the way, I have the word COVID in the title, and I'm saying the word COVID, and I know it may get me yanked from certain platforms. I'm just telling you guys, if you follow me on certain platforms, you need to follow me on other ones, because Facebook, sometimes on YouTube, they're still limiting your reach. So go to Apple Podcasts, and while you're there, give me a 5-star rating. Okay, maybe 4 is okay. 3, shut up. All right. Go to Spotify, whatever, or wherever it is, that other places, because Facebook and YouTube have had their moments. But I'm just saying it. Critical COVID theory. So we're talking about why I'm covering that. I'm going to talk about the news that's happening. Then I'm going to cover some other things slightly in the Christian world, and I plan on getting to why I'm calling this critical COVID theory, because it's about critical theory, because we are living in a time just where critical theory and postmodernism, that is the air that we breathe. And I know that sometimes those terms might, freak people out. Don't get freaked out. It's simple to understand. Well, that is if you listen to Cooper Stuff, because I explain it to you simply. Okay, let's jump in. COVID. Why did I even start talking about COVID? I never want to talk about COVID. I want to rock. I want to rock the free world. But not like the guy that sings Rock the Free World that wanted to censor everybody's speech, who didn't say what he wanted them to say about COVID. Anyway, I want to rock and roll. I want to tell people about my faith. I want to help people. If you remember the whole point of Cooper Stuff, I want to help people live for Jesus and understand the culture. Like when they're like, they see this stuff and they're like, why in the world are drag queens reading books to school children in public library? How is that happening? I want to help people understand what in the world is going on. That's what Cooper Stuff is. I don't want to start talking about COVID and things like that. Why did I get involved? 2 reasons. Number one, because as Christians, you know what we're supposed to care about? The truth. It's supposed to. You're welcome. That's why you watch Cooper Stuff. You never figure that out on your own. We're supposed to care about the truth. Well, that seems kind of easy enough, right? We are supposed to care about truth. And because we care about truth, then we care about what leads to human flourishing, what leads to producing, right? What leads to blessing. And its inverse, what leads to curse, what leads to anti-flourishing, what leads to humans not doing all that good, okay? And as you begin to understand the truth, and understand human flourishing, you begin to understand. Sorry, I got my little earpieces. I know it doesn't sound super great today, sorry. But they keep falling in my ears because they get so animated. Anyway, human flourishing, the truth, what is going to lead to a good society? Well, you begin to understand when you read the Bible that is going to begin, my responsibility as a Christian begins with self-government. God wants me to govern myself. He wants me to be transformed into the image of Christ. And I can do that through the power of the Spirit, of course, through the Word of God. As I read the Word of God and I found out what I'm supposed to do, who I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to act like, then I need to self-govern. Now, this is just kind of, we get into basic political philosophy here. But what this means is that in order for humans to flourish, you have to govern yourself. If you don't govern yourself, guess what's going to happen? Someone else is going to govern you for you, all right? And the reason I'm saying this is because when we look in just political philosophy, we look into what we have become known as Enlightenment principles and stuff that America was very impacted by. What you find out was that these Enlightenment principles were actually Reformation ideas, largely, because people like John Calvin went back to the Old Testament and said, well, wait a minute. God created a just society. He created laws for a society with the Jewish people for how to live to please God. So what does that mean for us today? What can we do to please God for today? And so government begins with self-government. So this is what I'm saying. I love the truth. I want to see people survive and thrive. I want to see people flourish. And what you are going to find out all throughout the Bible is that government has a tendency, it's not just a tendency, a desire to become a beast, and they want to be tyrannical. They want to be totalitarian. They feel, because the government typically does not believe that there is an authority above them. They don't believe there's a transcendent God above them or a higher law above the law of the state. They want all of the power. Why? Well, for lots of reasons, sinful nature. But even if you give them the benefit of the doubt and you say, okay, I believe they have really good hearts. They love people. They want people to survive. They want people to thrive. They want people to flourish. They want to save lives. Even if you give them all the benefit of the doubt, that all of their intentions are good. You say, I think they have good motives. Even if you do that, in the end, what they believe is that there is no law above them. In other words, they think they are capable in their own strength, without the law of God, without the Bible, without any transcendent order or anything, of coming up with the perfect society. That's what they want to do. They think they can come up with the absolute perfect society using nothing but the wisdom of man. This is called secular humanism. It means setting up a moral foundation for society, a law foundation for society that has absolutely nothing to do with a God, a higher law, transcendent being, the Bible, nothing outside of man, nothing external. It's only from internal. It's what man decides. And so because of that, what they end up saying is that we are the state, we are the enlightened ones, you people are the normies. You're not enlightened enough to govern yourself, so we are going to govern you for you. That is a tyranny. So as a Christian, number one, why I speak about COVID? Because I think truth matters. I thought that Christians all used to think that truth matters. Kind of a big deal. I want to see truth expounded in our lives so that we know how to live for Jesus, so that we can flourish in society. And one of the things you're going to see all throughout the Bible, the state, the government has a tendency to want to govern you for you. They want to take your ability to self-govern away from you. Now you might go, it's kind of political. I don't really know if that really affects me. Yes, it does affect you, because then the state can decide if you're allowed to worship God, what God you are allowed to worship, when you're allowed to worship, where you're allowed to worship. Or maybe we have so many instances of this throughout the world, all right? And this is very pertinent to COVID. If you just use your imagination, you see where that's going. So it matters a great deal, self-governance. Now, there's a new trend happening in Christianity that is saying, John, it sounds like you're just promoting Americanism. You're promoting these American ideas. These ideas don't come from America. That's what I'm trying to say. It's the reformers that sort of reinvigorated these ideas from Old Testament Jewish, sort of like republicanism in a certain way, all right? With a lot of other ideas, a lot Enlightenment principles and whatnot, but they were based on the Bible, all right? So We look at John Locke. John Locke has, the natural rights of man, and this is where he's one of the major people that we get our concept of inalienable rights. Oh, and you can never say that word every time. Inalienable. God-given rights. These are rights that precede government. Well, yeah, they came from this Enlightenment thinker, John Locke. Largely, though, John Locke's inspiration for those things was the book of Genesis. God creates Adam and Eve in his image. So from that, he extrapolates all these ideas that all humans are created equal. There are universal truths. God doesn't create me to be more worthy or more in his image than someone else from another part of the world. Someone else with a different color skin. Hello, this is how we actually ended up ending slavery, was from these Enlightenment principles based on the book of Genesis. So no matter where you come from, the color of your skin, whether you're a man or you're a woman, no matter what class you are in, yada, yada, yada. If you're tall or short, if you've got a gorgeous beard or not, I'm sorry if you don't. So the point is, all men are created equal. That is an idea that we get from the book of Genesis. I know I'm going on a tangent. There's an idea for people to say, John, that's just Americanism. It's kind of idolatrous. Well, I would just ask you, I want to win you over today. I would ask you this. Then, if you think that this concept of self-governance is some idolatrous American idea, what would you rather put in place? Who would you rather govern you than you? Because the other option is going to be a group of elites that are going to press their humanistic ideas down upon you. And you are going to lose your ability to govern yourself, to say, I want to live a life that pleases the Lord. How do I live a life that pleases God? They'll say, no, don't worry about that. We'll tell you what to do. Don't worry about that. Leave that to us. So why do I start speaking about COVID? Because I care about truth. But the second reason I started talking about COVID is even more important. Because the first one, I can care about all those things, but it doesn't mean I got to come on a podcast and start screaming about it, right? The second one is more important. Why did I start talking about COVID? Because our Christian leaders lost their stinking minds. I said it. Not all of them. There's a lot of awesome Christian leaders that stood up, pastors that watch this show. I just met one a couple weeks ago at our first show on the tour. He came up to me at the VIP. I hope you're watching. He said, I'm a pastor that watches your show because I'm always making jokes about it. I said, I don't know what you do, but thank you. There's a lot of great pastors out there. I'm not talking about you. I am talking about the intelligentsia. I heard John Harris on Conversations That Matter. I heard him call them the regime evangelicals. I thought that was a brilliant title. I'm going to borrow it from John Harris. The regime evangelicals. You could call them the Christian intelligentsia. Sometimes I've heard people call them cultural managers. But you can have that outside of Christianity, just in general. The cultural managers. They are the elites that are steering us in the way that we should go. They want to tell you what to eat. They want to tell you how much you can use your, gas stove, okay? They're the people that say you got to get rid of your car. These are the cultural managers. They are the elites. Well, Christianity has those too. And I like this title, regime evangelicals. The regime evangelicals were just saying nonsense about COVID. Absolute nonsense. And I just thought, I just can't stay silent. I kept praying, God, certainly you don't want me to say I'm a rock star. Hello. I don't need to be talking about COVID. I'm not smart. I'm not a science guy. But these people were letting us down in such incredible, it can't be exaggerated. Saying things that were just frankly, I want to have grace for them, so I'm not saying they were lies, but they were imprudent. They should have had more wisdom to look at what was happening. It's almost like they just totally forgot the principle that government is going to become tyrannical. They just totally forgot. They kind of went, oh no, they really actually do like us. They just want the best for us. Do they? And even if they do, does that actually matter if they see themselves as God? Hello. If they have deified themselves, does it really matter if they, quote, want the best for us or not? They just want to give people the happies. I don't care. It's just so absolutely imprudent to do such a thing. There's lots of people that say they wanted the best for us. Sorry to say it, but Hitler said he wanted the best for the German people, right? Yeah, it might mean the death of a whole lot of people. It's Lenin. Lenin said the same thing. You go through the list of people that slaughtered millions of people. They wanted, quote, they wanted the best for the people. Well, that doesn't really mean anything to me. Lots of satanic ideas. Hello. Lots of satanic ideas that come in the name of wanting the best for people.
All of this to me is just satanic.
Yes, it is. Sometimes I'll tell you what, you got to think about what you think about.
Think about what you think about.
So those are the two reasons that I started talking about COVID in the first place. I cannot believe how many people got really mad at me because I'm so naive. I was like, this is just reasonable. So let me tell you where I've always been out on COVID in case you're a new watcher. I've always said this. I'm proud of my stance on it. I am. I'm not always proud of my stances, but I'm proud of my stance on this. Said from the beginning, this is pretty confusing stuff. We are being lied to by the media. Do not trust the media. Big media is almost just as bad as politicians, maybe worse. I just don't know. They both stink so bad. It's a little bit tough. You're like, which one would I rather have? Extreme vomiting or extreme diarrhea? I just, they're both kind of bad. I don't really know which one I want. That's what media and politicians are, respectively. I don't know. Do not trust the media. They are all in. Why? Because they're a part of the regime. They're a part of the cultural managers that we just talked about. They're all in on this. They're all in on all of it. The Great Reset, the whole thing. They want to control your life. They do not want you to self-govern because they think you're too stupid to govern yourself. Right? So do not trust them. Read for yourself. We are being told opposite things from so many people. I don't know what to do, but I would just say this. Do not trust big media. Do not trust big tech. Do your own research and ask yourself a few questions. And this is when I started getting really loud about it because the propaganda was coming to us so fast. Look, how much propaganda do we have for all of the George Floyd BLM stuff, systemic racism stuff? We already just had literally 3 years, 3.5, 4, at this point, 4 years of absolute lies and propaganda from the media. We just had Dr. Fauci flip-flop on masks. And he goes on TV, he's like, absolutely, these masks don't do what you think they do. They completely don't. Then he comes back later and says, well, we were only just saying that because we were trying to save them from medical work. So what you're saying is that you are willing to lie if it makes you get what you want. That's a red flag. That's a red flag. I don't understand all these things that are going on. All the masking stuff happens, which led me eventually to end up doing my podcast that sort of went viral. That got me in a lot of trouble with a lot of people when it was called Would Jesus Wear a Mask? And the reason I did it is because you had Christian evangelicals, regime evangelicals, they might be called, like Beth Moore saying, for God's sake, in its holy church, you got to wear a mask, love people. All right, so you had all that going on. It really made me mad. Acting as if those of us who don't believe in universal masking just don't love Jesus and don't love people and are breaking the 10 Commandments. we don't even like people, apparently. All right. Well, that was really annoying because I'm saying, look, I don't know. I think the mask is theater. And one of the reasons I think the mask is theater, I've read a whole bunch of stuff about it. And I think I'm not very convinced that it really does anything, but also because the very people that are forcing me to wear a mask, they're not wearing a mask. So it's a little bit like if they're going to say you absolutely have to do it or you're killing people, and then we see them, week after week after week, having birthday parties without masks, going out to dinners without masks. Lori Lightfoot of the mayor of Chicago, going to get her hair cut without a mask after she's put everybody else in lockdown. Something is going on. I do not believe your propaganda. This smells a lot like tyranny to me. All right? So that's where we're at. My thing was this. If you feel you need to wear a mask, wear one. If you feel you need to get the jab, get the jab. 3 years ago, I never would have thought I would ever be someone that would care about these kind of things. But all of a sudden, it's smelling like a beast to me. It smells like tyranny to me. And Christians are supposed to care. So let's go on. All the things that are coming out with COVID now. Here you go. This is CNN.com. I chose CNN.com so people can't accuse me of just being some sort of right-wing hack. U.S. Energy Department assesses COVID-19 likely resulted from lab leak. furthering U.S. intel divide over the virus origin. I can't even believe people are still arguing about this stuff. This was also another thing that got me involved in this. Because from the beginning, the whole lab leak thing, you're like, well, yeah, they know this started in Wuhan. There is a research facility there doing research on COVID, on bats and yada, yada. It's the same facility that just a few years earlier, people had warnings about saying, hey, actually the restrictions at this facility aren't good. We need to up them or else we could have a breach. All right. But by the way, Stephen King wrote about this in The Stand. When I remember when The Stand was written, it was a long time ago. People are saying, hey, these protocols aren't really good several years ago. Here we are today. We know it came from Wuhan. It's just common sense to go, this likely could have started in a lab. People lost their minds. I'm going to tell you later. Christian, what is the word? Regime evangelicals were calling this conspiracy theories for saying it. And the fact that the big media, big tech, big government, and the regime evangelicals were all clamping down on this, saying you are not allowed to say it, or we're going to take you off of social media. We're going to say that you just don't love Jesus. You don't love your neighbor. That was a big sign to me that said, okay, wait a minute. Something not good is going on. Like, if you want to say I'm a conspiracy theory, you made me this way with all of your insanity. So now, as we know, I'll read a little bit from CNN. The U.S. Department of Energy has assessed that the COVID-19 pandemic most likely came from a laboratory leak in China. According to a newly updated classified intelligence report. It's like Trump said, I call it the China virus because it comes from China. So there you go. The amount of regime evangelicals and Christians saying that you are a racist for saying that it probably leaked from a lab from China. Guys, this is just insane. This is going into what I hope I'm going to get to in this extremely long podcast. What I hope I'm going to get to, this ties in to critical theory. This ties into the world we live in, which is built on postmodernism and critical theory, and this idea of empathy and equity and victimology. Well, you got a sensitivity to all things. It's not insensitive to say this probably leaked out of a lab from Wuhan. It's not. How's that insensitive? Anything that could remotely be seen as insensitive, you're not allowed to say, but we're people that are supposed to care about the truth. And we need to self-govern. Guess what happens if you don't self-govern? The totalitarian state or cultural managers or all of the levers of power are going to govern you for you, which is exactly what they did over the lab leak theory. They came down on you like a ton of bricks. If you said it was leaked from a lab, boom, you're not allowed to say it. You're kicked out of polite society. You're censored from social media. You're dinged on your platforms. You're a bad person. You might even be a racist. They did all of these things. Why? Because they do not want you to govern yourself. They want to govern you for you. All right, let's move on from that. So I'm not going to read all of these things. You probably already heard it. Basically, most people agree now, yeah, okay, probably came from a lab leak. Now, people on the left and the progressives who have been making fun of us for 3 years about the lab leak theory, and even, I won't say that. So they've been making fun of conspiracy theorists. Now they're coming back saying, well, we only said that because you guys were saying, they're talking about us, we were saying that it was intentionally fabricated as a bioweapon, all right? Which was another theory that was going around. So you had two theories. One was that, both theories said it originated from the Wuhan lab. One said that it leaked, as in they were doing research and it was a mistake, and it leaked out. The other was, if it was created there and there's so much propaganda and we're not allowed to say it and they're clamping down on us as if we're crazy, the amount they're clamping down on us makes it feel like something more nefarious is going on. Maybe this was a bioweapon. Maybe they did this on purpose. Coopers have never said that. I never said that. I never believed that. But should it be allowed to be said? Yes, it should be allowed to be said, in my opinion, especially when you had other international agencies like the World Health Organization carrying water for China. They were lying for China. They lied about this. The world, honestly, the World Health Organization is a joke. It's a complete joke. The UN is almost just, I think the UN is kind of a joke as well. All of these international agencies basically all have one agenda. They all have the same one agenda. It's the same agenda as the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum. It's the same thing as I said earlier about secular humanistic utopia. They're all utopians. They all want to, so basically in the way that governments want to rule over you, all of these international agencies want to rule over the world. They want to have a one world socialistic utopian technocracy, okay? I think that Glenn Beck in his book called The Great Reset, I believe that Glenn Beck called it 21st century fascism is what he called it. Joe Boot, I believe, calls it globalist technocracy. It's all basically one world socialism. You do not get to govern yourself. All of these cultural managers, the power elites are going to join together and all the nations around the world in order for them to all have the same agenda: equity, diversity, inclusion, socialism, wealth redistribution. They want to govern everything about your life, which is why they're all involved in the radical climate stuff. It's why they want you to stop eating meat and start eating bugs as quickly as possible. It's why they want to get rid of your cars and yada, yada, yada. You guys know this probably. All that is happening. All those agencies join together to cover for China. So it's not out of bounds for people to say, what in the world is going on? Maybe this was a bioweapon. I never believed it was a bioweapon, personally. But I think it should be able to be said. So now what you have is basically the left saying, okay, maybe it came from a lab. We only fought you because you were saying it was a bioweapon. We thought you were going to go too far. We were concerned about that. So we clamped down on you and disallowed you to say anything for your own good. It's basically the same thing that Lenin did in the Russian Revolution. We're going to put you in the gulags, but you got to understand, it's for your own good. We're going to put you in prison, but it's because we're going to retrain you to understand the right way to think. This is, but they had good intentions, John. Yeah, okay. That doesn't mean poo-poo dookie to me. Let's move on. What else do we got? Here's another thing that's come out. Let's read this from NBC News. I'm choosing these outlets so people don't just say, he's only reading from Breitbart or something like that, okay? NBC News, immunity acquired from a COVID infection. Hold on, wait for it. I know you probably know it, but I still got to celebrate. Immunity acquired from a COVID infection is as protective as vaccination against severe illness and death, study finds. What? What? All my friends were hitting me with this. They were going, can you believe this? They're admitting it. And I thought they admitted. I think I hit one of my friends and said, I thought they admitted this like a year ago. We've known this for so long that it wasn't even news to me, but it was huge news all over social media. I was like, I thought everybody knew this already. This just shows you what we're going to get to in a little while. We're going to get to it, I promise, why critical theory has so much to do with this. And why our Christian, what do they call them? I keep forgetting the word, regime evangelicals. Oh, that just sounds nefarious. The regime. We're building empire. Yes. Anyway, speaking of, I just thought of this. It's my ADD, I gotta say it. It's glorious. Speaking of, we're building empire. That's a song from a band called Queensryche when I was growing up. When I did my podcast a couple of years ago, it was called Would Jesus Wear a Mask? And I was going off on Beth Moore and some of the regime evangelicals for telling us Jesus would absolutely do this. My position was, hey, wear a mask if you believe it's the right thing. Ask the Holy Spirit what you should do. Read the material. Do not trust the media. They're lying to you. They're a bunch of commies, commie poop, heretical people. Don't listen to them. Read your own stuff. Ask the Holy Spirit what you should do. But I personally think that this stuff is theater. I got in a lot of heat. People were really mad, and I was covered on some of the music outlets, and the singer, the current singer from Queensryche, was dogging me, and it was big news in the rock world. He was like saying that I was an idiot and full of, bleep and blah, 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 blah. And because basically he's saying basically I'm a science denier, and he's an atheist. So he's basically saying, of course, that I'm a science denier because I believe in this imaginary God, whatever. Anyway, I'd like to see what he has to say about all this stuff now. And then, if I was right about this, maybe I'm also right about the existence of God. I'm only saying food for thought to the atheists who think that science is God. Guess what? Science is going to change over and over and over. There's only one truth that is absolute, the truth of the Lord Jesus Christ, all right? So, you know what? Food, take it, put that in your pipe and smoke it. All right, here we go. Immunity acquired from a COVID infection provides strong, lasting protection against the most severe outcomes of the illness. Now, this is insane. This is insane because the regime evangelicals, they were telling us we weren't allowed to say things like this. You're not allowed to say that. You're just denying the science. You can't be spreading conspiracy theories. I mean, all you had to do was look around to see how many people keep getting COVID over and over and over again, and how many of those people, had, in other words, people who had COVID the first time were not as likely to get it, it seemed like. That's just what it seemed like. It's just common sense. Take a look around. On the other hand, a lot of my friends who got not just 2, but 3 booster shots, for some reason, they just keep getting COVID over and over and over again. Now, spreading a conspiracy theory, that's my experience, and it has to be real because I feel it to be true. Anyway, that's a joke, of course, but you get it. Here we go. Immunity acquired from a COVID infection provides strong, lasting protection against the most severe outcomes of the illness, according to research published Thursday in The Lancet. Protection experts say that's on par with provided through 2 doses of an mRNA vaccine. What else have we learned? So that's that. Let's see. I'm going to read this one from the New York Post because I quite like it. It's called 10 Myths Told by COVID Experts. Now Debunked. Oh, I love it. Number 1, you ready? Number 1, natural immunity offers little protection compared to vaccinated immunity. We've known this for so long. We're not allowed to say it. And now they're like, well, yeah, that's actually true. Woo! I think that deserves a fancy Nancy. Huh? A Lancet study looked at 65 major studies in 19 countries on natural immunity. The researchers concluded that natural immunity was at least as effective as the primary COVID vaccine series. In fact, the scientific data was there all along. Fact check true, New York Post. It was there all along. We've known this for so long, you guys. They did not say it. Why? Because they have an agenda. That is not what real science is. That is called activism, which we're going to get to, because that's what critical theory does for all of life, okay? And this is what evangelical elites have also subsumed. They have subsumed political activism of all sorts into their, what you say, theology. What would you want to say? When they apply the Bible to practical life, such as, should I get a vax? Should I wear a mask? Should I do this or this or the other? They are applying critical theory style activism to their theology. That's the reason you cannot trust the regime evangelicals anymore. Sorry. In fact, the scientific data was there all along. From 160 studies, despite the findings of these studies violating Facebook's, quote, misinformation policy. Absolutely true. That's why I tell you, if you follow me on Facebook, you got to go elsewhere. Since the Athenian plague of, I'm not going to read that. We don't need to read that. All right. That was also the observation of nearly every practicing physician during the first 18 months of the COVID pandemic. Most Americans who were fired for not having the COVID vaccine already had antibodies that effectively neutralized the virus, but they were antibodies that the government did not recognize. You guys realize this, right? When all these health workers who ended up getting COVID because they were working with COVID patients, but how they get COVID, I don't understand. They had masks on. Hello. Most of them had COVID. They got it. And so then they felt, I'm immune for this. I don't need to get the vaccine. Then they were fired, even though they did have the antibodies. Why? Because it wasn't about science. It was about activism. Misinformation number 2, according to New York Post. Masks prevent COVID transmission. Oh, this is so juicy. This is so juicy. Cochrane reviews are considered the most authoritative and independent assessment of the evidence in medicine. So Cochrane reviews came out. I'll read something about this later. McCoggin Reviews is like they considered the most authoritative independent assessment of evidence. This just came out about 3 weeks ago, I believe. And one published last month by a highly respected Oxford research team found that masks had no significant impact on COVID transmission. When asked about this definitive review, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky downplayed it, arguing that it was flawed because it focused on randomized control studies. So basically, they're not going to let go of this narrative. But that was the greatest strength of the review. Randomized studies are considered the gold standard of medical evidence. You cannot trust these people. Our politicians and our bureaucrats, they do not have your best interests at heart. Now, they may think that they do, just like Lenin thought he had the best interests in heart, putting people in prison to re-educate them. All right, just like lots of people think they have their best interests in heart, but they're flawed because their worldview is wrong, because they believe that they are the highest authorities. It's absolutely insane to me, okay? If all the energy used by public health officials to mask toddlers could have been channeled to reduce child obesity by encouraging outdoor activities, we would be better off, the New York Post says. Absolutely agreed. Fact check. True. All right. Misinformation number 3. School closures reduce COVID transmission. The CDC ignored the European experience of keeping schools open, most without mask mandates. Transmission rates were no different, evidenced by studies concluded in Spain and Sweden. I want you to know a couple things, guys. We knew this literally in 2020. We knew it literally in 2020. This is another perfect example why just because people say, well, they have good motives, it doesn't matter. You do a lot of nasty, satanic, stupid things. But I have people's heart, interest doesn't matter. This is a perfect example because you have all these people, progressives, that did not allow kids to go to school in major cities for 2 years. Well, we had this information in 2020. This was already known. They wouldn't do it because they are political activists. And they kept saying, but we have the kids' interests. We have their best interests. All we want is to keep them safe. So we're going to keep them home. It didn't do anything. Except it hurt the most marginalized kids who are already the most marginalized. In inner cities, all it did was put them another year and a half behind. Which, by the way, if you've read any of the statistics about schooling, about how kids are doing, the amount of kids who cannot read, that graduate high school and literally cannot read proficiently, they cannot do math proficiently. I mean, the public school system is a joke already. And this pushed them back another year, all in the name of wanting to help people. Misinformation number 4, myocarditis from the vaccine is less common than from the infection. This was one that really got me, that was really upsetting because I had lots of friends that were about to get their young teenage boys vaccinated. And I said to them, hey, before you do, I'm not telling you what to do, you pray about it. You have self-governance over your family. I don't. Please read this study that came out from the UK. This was whenever, last year, I think. From the UK, they were starting to say no more vaccines for teenagers. We're not recommending them because there are these large episodes of myocarditis. My friends kept coming back to me with their own articles saying, actually, myocarditis is more prevalent if you get it. So they're saying myocarditis from them getting COVID is worse than them getting myocarditis from the vaccine, which was absolutely untrue. That was the misinformation. So that is a misinformation number 4. And then they say public health officials downplay concerns about vaccine-induced myocarditis or inflammation of the heart muscle. They cited poorly designed studies that undercaptured complication rates. A flurry of well-designed studies said the opposite. We now know that myocarditis is 6 to 28 times more common after the COVID vaccine than after the infection among 16 to 24-year-old males. Tens of thousands of children likely got myocarditis, mostly subclinical from COVID vaccine they did not need because they were entirely healthy or because they had already had COVID. Misinformation number 5, young people benefit from a vaccine booster. I'm not going to read the rest. Misinformation number 6, vaccine mandates increase vaccination rates. Number 7, COVID originating from the Wuhan lab is a conspiracy theory. Already covered that. Misinformation number 8, it was important to get the second vaccine dose 3 or 4 weeks after the first dose. Misinformation number 9, data on the I don't know, bivalent vaccine is crystal clear. I don't really know what that is. Don't care. Misinformation number 10. 1 in 5 people get long COVID. By the way, right now, I'm not going to get into this, but one of the things we were told right now, as you can see, there is an insane, absolutely cannot be exaggerated amount of young people just dying. You've probably seen the died suddenly stuff. There's a fantastic thing on Rumble. Go check it out. I believe it's just called Die Suddenly, isn't it? I think that's what it's called on, and of course it's putting a narrative saying that the vaccine is causing this, whatever. Look, I'm not making any statements on what is causing this, but we've got 24, 25-year-olds just dying every day. And a lot of these people are athletes. We're talking about the most in shape, fittest, healthiest people literally on planet Earth. You're talking about soccer players in the prime of their life that run for they got 3% body fat. They run for 3 hours straight. Just boom, dead. People don't know why. People are saying, oh, it's because of long COVID. That's what the left is saying. This has to be looked into. The left is saying it's long COVID. So now we have all this going on. And if we say, do we think that maybe there's just a chance that we didn't know what the vaccination might do, and maybe in some people it's causing some really bad stuff, if you say that, you will be chastised by the evangelical elites. You will be called not loving your neighbor, spreading misinformation by these organizations. And so this takes me to, I told you, it's the number 2 reason I started speaking about COVID. I want to read you a couple of things that you're seeing, that we saw, the last 2 years from evangelical elites. Listen to this one. This was in 2021. And this is from the Gospel Coalition, Australia. The article is called COVID Vaccination and the Church. And it says, it's from an author called Megan Best. Megan Best is a professional bioethicist and a value contributor to Gospel Coalition. As with all our articles, we offer her reflections on vaccination and government health policy as a worthy contribution to our public discussion, not as a Gospel Coalition Australia policy. So, she goes about what vaccination is, safety and efficacy. So basically, she's just saying all of the things that the establishment was saying. Basically, vaccinations are awesome. We know that it's working. You can't spread misinformation about it because they're wicked awesome and everybody's got to get them. And we know it works. And because of that, Jesus wants us all to get vaccines. But listen to where it goes from there. Listen to this. Because it's called Vaccines at the Church. Why vaccine passports? So this is a Christian, the Gospel Coalition. All right, Gospel Coalition was started by Tim Keller and another guy, I can't remember his name. So the Gospel Coalition exists because basically we have an evangelical establishment that all, frankly, look, I'm not trying to be rude. They want to reach the world. I love it. I applaud them for that. Thank you. So do I. And a lot of them believe that no one has done a better job of that than Tim Keller. And that's up for discussion for another time for lots of things. Tim Keller has said some awesome stuff. He said some things that I've talked about on my show that I disagree with. So the Gospel Coalition exists in order to make pastors like people like Tim Keller. His way of winsomeness, his way of saying we need to find ways to reach the world and to show them that we do care about them. That we need a justification for why the church exists, because we love people, because Christ loves us and Christ would love people and you want to reach them. We need to find ways to be winsome. That's what the Gospel Coalition is. The point is, the Gospel Coalition is extremely influential. And they exist, they have all these contributors, in order to train up pastors in the way of that kind of thinking. How do we confront these kind of cultural issues in the way that maybe Tim Keller would? And we want to be winsome. So this author says, why vaccine passports? And she goes from there to make a case that vaccine passports are not only good, wait for it, not only good, but that we need vaccine passports in church. So if you don't have a vaccine, then you don't get to come to church. That is the argument that she's making. So she says, for Christians, a major concern raised by the introduction of vaccine passports is the question of whether double vaccination should be a requirement for attendance at a church meeting. So then she says, a duty to gather, ? A biblical text frequently cited in connection with this discussion is an exhortation in Hebrews 10:24-25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So she from there makes the case that, guys, that doesn't mean we have to literally meet together. That's not necessary. The church doesn't. And so she says the reference to meeting together is grammatically subordinate to the primary exhortation in verse 24. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. That's what matters. Not the meeting together part. You just got to spur one another on. It's a function within this sentence is to unpack what it will look like for the readers to obey the primary exhortation. It would be ironic in the extreme if we were to seize on the words about meeting together and use them as a justification for rushing back prematurely and without vaccination into face-to-face gatherings without giving careful considerations to the, quote, love and good deeds we are meant to be spurring each other on toward. So she goes through this whole thing. So that's not, I don't really even think that's what it means. So she then says, well, there are some people with conscientious objections and this and the other. And so then she says, what biblical principles apply as we seek to address questions such as these? Number one, love our neighbors. This is what she's going to say. So basically, vaccinations are awesome. You're not allowed to question that because we know that for sure. We know for sure. And if you don't get vaccinated, then you're the only one that can spread it. We know that for sure. And even if you had COVID, if you don't have the vaccination, then you are a danger to everybody else. We know that for sure. It's objective truth. You are not allowed to argue it. And then she has her point number two. By the way, I'm being sarcastic. In other words, she's wrong about all of that. But she's a bioethicist. Number two, obey our leaders. So then she's, well, our leaders said it. So guys, we kind of have to do it, right? Number three, respect the consciences of others. So she's saying the fact that there are people there that are going to be, really scared, you got to respect that. Now, to be fair to her, she is also saying, I'll quote her, those who are genuinely convinced that it would be morally wrong for them to accept the vaccine should not be coerced into sinning against their conscience. But conscientious objection usually comes at a cost of some sort. And the safety of the most vulnerable members of the church and the wider community should not be held hostage to the desires of the others they should please. So what she's saying is this, hey, if you have a conscientious objection, we do need to have grace for you, but your conscientious objection, there's a cost to that I shouldn't have to bear. You should have to bear that. Now, do I have a real problem with that? No, not really, except that she's kind of twisting this thing. What she's saying is that we believe that we are morally right. You believe that you have a moral thing that you just can't be a part of that. So we're going to have grace for you as long as you stay away from us. We're going to have grace for you. Hey, we still love you, but you definitely are not allowed to that. You are a danger to us because of all these other things. I agree. There's a cost to conscientious objections. I agree. But I don't really like how this is being flipped. We have grace for you. Just stay away. Number four, prioritize the weakest and most vulnerable. So what she's saying is this, there are people here who are absolutely vulnerable. They have immunity problems. They have health issues. And if they get COVID, they can end up dying. And they're coming to church. But they're totally fine because they got vaccinated. Do you see what's happening? In other words, if I had a medical condition, and I had an immunity issue, and there was a chance that if I got COVID, that my child could die, I would stay out of church for a little while. In that sense, I wouldn't say, well, yeah, God wants me to go meet together with the saints, even though my little one might die. There's a 50-50 chance I might die if they get this from somebody singing a hymn. Well, for me, I'd be like, I think that God entrusts me to self-govern in this instance. I'm going to stay home for 6 months and see how this goes. But that's not how the Gospel Coalition Australia is handling it. The Gospel Australia is saying, well, actually, no. The weakest ones are still coming. So it is on you to go do something that you feel is morally wrong. It's on you to stay away in order to protect, or else just love your neighbor and get the vax already, 2 of them. And then you can be allowed to come to show your passport, and then you're allowed to come back to church. Do you see where this is going? So she's basically making this case. That's the Gospel Coalition. I wish I had internet because my Daily Wire is not loading up like it should be. But there's some long, amazing reporting done by Megan Basham in the Daily Wire about how evangelical leaders were used to parrot the authoritarian measures of COVID through Francis Collins. Francis Collins was the NIH director, and he's one of the people at BioLogos. BioLogos is an organization that wants to bring Christianity and the scientific community together. People write articles on BioLogos like Tim Keller and people like that. What they're trying to do is say, we need to be more winsome to the world and not be those people that say, I'm anti-science, I'm against evolution. So people like Tim Keller are actually sort of pro-evolution. And some people might not know that. I'm not trying to be rude to him, but he is. Go read his articles about it. So he wants to say, no, I'm not against science. I kind of believe in evolution. I think that makes sense. And we're going to do this BioLogos thing with Francis Collins, who is Biden's director of the NIH, because Francis Collins is an evangelical Christian, supposedly, even though I don't have time to get it. Read Megan Basham's articles. So basically, you start seeing this teaming up between Francis Collins and all these evangelical elites. It's covered in Daily Wire. And that was with Ed Stetzer, who writes for churchleaders.com. Ed Stetzer used to be the editor at Christianity Today. Christianity Today got in on the action. Tim Keller got in the action. N.T. Wright, who's a theologian. Who's the commie guy? Who's the guy that wrote Purpose Driven Life? Rick Warren. All these people got involved. David French, of course, of the French Revolution, of course. All these people got involved in order to chastise Christians who did not want to wear the mask, did not want to get the vax, who were, quote, spreading conspiracy theories like the lab leak theory. People were saying, I don't want to get the vax because I don't think I need it. They were making fun of us. They were saying that you just don't love your neighbor. Rick Warren actually said it is the job of Christian faith leaders to convince their people to trust the science. That's a quote from Rick Warren. Go look it up. That's our job as pastors. We got to tell people to trust the science. And they berated us and berated us. Here's what I want to know to all of those evangelical leaders. The evangelical regime, I want to know from them, when are you going, to apologize? When are you going to repent? I don't think that you should have known all the right answers. Frankly, you should have done what Cooper stuff did, which was to say, I don't know what you should do. This is a matter of conscience. You need to read the stuff, pray, because we are being lied to on a huge, gigantic scale. They should have done what Cooper stuff did and had the prudence to understand from reading the Bible that self-governance is a good thing. You do not want to give over all of your freedoms to the beast, which is the state. Why? Because they have a tendency to want to be totalitarian. They want to be God. They want to govern your life for you. They should have had that prudence. I'm not a theologian. You don't have to be brilliant to understand that. And you know what you have to, you know what I think you have to, in order to do what they did, you don't have to be, here's what it is. You know what you have to do in order to do what they did? You have to become a political activist. You have to become a political activist, which is getting into the end. I promise you, we've only got 5 minutes left, I hope. Gets into the end of what I want to say. This is where critical theory comes into play. This is the reason that the regime evangelicals are failing us on a gigantic scale, you guys. They have let critical theory seep into their worldview. They now read the Bible through a lens of, I would call it critical theory light. But I would say when it comes to social issues, they interpret the Bible, when you read the Bible and then you interpret it and you apply it to life. So, for instance, I read the Bible. The Bible says, do not murder. I apply it to life. Somebody says, hey, how do you feel about abortion? I say, what is abortion? They say it is ending the fetus. Okay, they don't say the life. It's ending the fetus in the womb. I go, wait a minute, but I read the Bible, and I can see that God forms us together in my mother's womb, the Bible says. He knit me together in my mother's womb. I know that life starts because of God. Life doesn't just start because a man and a woman have sexual intercourse. Life starts because of God. He's the one that creates it. Do not murder. I look at that and I go, oh, well, I apply the Bible. No, of course I'm against abortion. That sort of application. All right, the evangelical elites I'm talking about, on application, they are full progressive critical theory. They're not critical theory light. They are critical theory. Let me explain to you, crash course, very quickly what I mean by that. Critical theory is different than traditional theory. Traditional theory and logic basically says this. Two things that are opposite cannot both be true. We need traditional thinking here, right? We want to use the scientific method, for instance. We want to test something. I see this big ball of flames that comes up in the sky every morning. It comes up there every morning and it keeps me warm. And day after day after day, I say, you know what? I bet that ball of light is going to come up again tomorrow. And we test it and it does. And so we go, okay, it's repeatable. It happens every single day. It keeps me warm during the day, every single day. And then it goes away. And then it's dark outside, right? This happens every single day, so I can make claims that are proven. And traditional logic says that A is true, and if B is A's opposite, they both can't be true. That is not what critical theory is. That is traditional theory. Critical theory is not based on absolute truth. In fact, it rejects the possibility of absolute truth. It doesn't believe in absolute morality. It doesn't believe in things like individual liberties. In fact, it despises individual liberties. Critical theory is literally, you guys, literally, any theory that works towards bringing the liberation of oppressed people. That is a critical theory, and it is good because it works towards liberation. Now, all of these things have to be defined in a certain way, which I don't have time to get into. You can use your imagination. Think like Karl Marx. Think like commies, okay? Think like social justice warriors. You have to define what liberation means. You have to define what oppressed people means. Oppressed people groups means oppressed in our social justice climate, all right? If you are not majority culture, if you look and say, well, there's not enough of this kind of person holding positions of authority in government, then they are oppressed people, yada, yada. Oppressed people means a certain kind of a thing. Because the perfect world of critical theorists is socialistic utopia. It is absolute equality. No one has anything more than anyone else. Okay? Anything. Your personal responsibilities, your personal decision making do not come into it. So if you look at somebody and go, yeah, but that guy's addicted to drugs. Of course, his lifespan isn't as high as someone who's never done drugs. To me, that just makes sense. To you, that just makes sense. To critical theorists, they say, that's not fair. That gives me the sads. It makes me sad, and it shouldn't be that way. We need equity. We need to make sure that that person doing drugs has the exact same lifespan as you. And I go, okay, so how are we going to get them off drugs? The critical theorists say, we don't want to get them off drugs. That's not your decision to make. That is, in fact, prejudicial. We need to find a way to get their lifespan up with yours without getting them off drugs. They can do whatever they want to do. Their decision making should have nothing, because they're moral relativists. So doing drugs it's not bad or good. It's what it is. If I say, they contracted AIDS from having promiscuous sex. So yes, they're not going to live as long as me. How do we get people to stop having promiscuous sex? They would say, you're not allowed to do that. There's no such thing as sexual immorality in their worldview. Everything has to be equity. A critical theory is any theory that pushes forward that. It doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. It doesn't matter how absurd it is. Critical theory is specifically, explicitly, they say it almost word for word. It is anti the scientific method. It is against any science that exists, listen to this, any science that exists to learn knowledge for the sake of knowledge. I'll say it again. They are against anything that wants to gain knowledge for the sake of itself. Just say, well, I want to learn about how this works. It's knowledge to understand the world. No. They are against that. That is abusive. It is oppressive. In fact, it is repressive, they say. Science can only be used to gain knowledge that works towards the liberation of oppressed people. That is why our science is so absolutely corrupt. It's the reason that no one was allowed to say that universal masking isn't doing jack dookie. You're not allowed to say that. Why? Because there are oppressed people that are hurting from COVID, and we need to look like we're doing something, so we are going to alter the facts and then put it out a new scientific fact saying, we know that masking works. We know it helps eliminate this. We know it's going to work. Why? Because COVID was seen to be hurting marginalized people the most. And we know some reasons that was. It's hurting inner cities the most because people are crammed into big apartment buildings and stuff. And you have old ventilation and people are sick in one place and it's going through, AC units and blah, blah, blah. And it's putting it all throughout the whole thing. They're living in close quarters. You got a family of 6 people living in a small apartment. Well, if one person gets it, everybody's going to get it up in here. And then you're going to end up giving it to other people in that little neighborhood because they're crammed together. Because of that, we need to put forward a theory. You can't just say, well, we know that's going to happen because they're living in closer quarters. That's just the way that it is. Okay? That's just the way it is. Sort of like I say, somebody that's addicted to drugs is probably not going to live as long as somebody that's not. That's just the way that it is. I don't really know. If we can't tell them to get off drugs, then I don't really know what we can do about this. Now, I'm not blaming people for living in close quarters. I hope you don't say that. I'm trying to make this a correlation. Well, the critical theorists don't like that. That's traditional theory. You say, well, I think one of the theories might be because they're kind of living there. I think we might be able to look at different parts of the world, even in different cities in America, and then we can also look at different cities in Spain and Italy and in the UK and Denmark. Let's begin to look at stuff and see, do we see a pattern here? That's traditional theory. The critical theorists saying, and the activists saying, I don't like that because that's not giving us what we need. That's not working for the liberation of these oppressed people. So how about this? I bet if we force everybody to wear masks, no, scratch that, 2 masks. I bet if, in fact, preschoolers, toddlers, babies, let's get everybody to wear 2 masks at all times. And I bet that's going to do it. So they put out scientific quote unquote fact. That's not actually fact because it works towards the liberation and they are seen as doing something good. They don't care. It doesn't matter if the policies work. You see, it's just like they say, hey, we got to care about these kids and we can't have these kids going to school and get COVID. Well, traditional theory says, well, why don't we look at some countries that have done that and let's see how it's actually working out. Is COVID breaking out in these schools that they're going back to? Well, no, they're not. They're not in America. Well, let's look at other countries. No, they're not in Denmark. No, that's not happening in Spain. It's not happening in the UK. Well, that's not going to actually work. We don't really like that because there are vulnerable people. Just like that article in Australia said, what about there are kids that go to school, you guys, who are immunocompromised. There are people, if they get COVID, those kids are going to die. And we have to protect those people. And it's not right to tell them just not to come back to school while the majority of kids can learn. That's not right because, you see, they are the oppressed people. So your traditional theory is not going to work. So let's put together a critical theory that says, actually, if you want to help the marginalized and the oppressed, which is the immunocompromised, then actually scientific evidence tells us the best thing we can do is shut down schools altogether across the board. There is no argument. And if you disagree, it's because you hate children and you want them to die. This is the way that critical theory works. This is the world we live in. It is victimology. It is a constant critique of everything in society, because critical theory is also called neo-Marxism. It's based on Marx. It is a complete critique of all things, and the world will never be good enough. Why will they think the world will never be good enough? Because they think they are God, and because they do not like the created order. They're not comfortable with the concept that we are never going to reach utopia. We're never going to reach the perfect world because of the human condition. Things are bad. You're never going to reach a time when the guy doing drugs is going to have the same lifespan as me. That's not going to happen. Sorry, it's the human condition. You can't just do anything in the whole world you want to do without any consequences. Sorry. And they go, well, I just don't like that. That gives me the sads. That makes me feel not good on the inside. And so they created a critical theories where they critique every little thing and they create victims of everybody. I will tell you this, the regime evangelicals, they have taken that on. Now, I'm not saying they take it on in their theology, but they do in their application of theology to social issues. It's the reason that sometimes Tim Keller will say something absolutely brilliant on theology, and I go, my gosh, that was a great way to say that. 100% accurate, blew my mind. And then when he gets into social issues on abortion, you're like, what? He's critical theory light sometimes in his theology. Not terrible, but sometimes there's some critical theory light. But when he applies it to social issues, it's critical theory, because critical theory makes you an activist, and that's what we are dealing with. All of our political class, they're not political philosophers; they're activists for the socialist regime. Big tech, activist. Big media, activists. Our Christian elites, they are now activists. Some of them might go, well, I'm only doing it because that's what the world is like and we want to reach them. But here's the thing, we go back to the point I started with. You are a Christian. You are supposed to care about the truth. You can't bend the truth in order to win people for the gospel. That is an absurdity. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, the Lord Jesus said. That's what's going on with COVID, and that's why I call it critical COVID theory. I hope you have a great week. Peace.
Read the Bible.